You awaken in the soft glow of an October morning, in the year 1347. The low wooden ceiling groans as the wind brushes across the thatched roof above. You sit up from your straw-filled bedding, stretching slowly as the first beams of light slip in through the cracks of the wooden door. The air is sharp with the early chill, and each breath you take fogs slightly in front of your face. Beside you, your wife still sleeps, her tangled hair hiding much of her face. One of her hands rests gently across the belly of your youngest child, nestled against her side. Your home is a single room. The earth-packed floor is worn smooth from years of footsteps, both human and animal. The walls, made of wattle and daub, wooden lattice filled with clay, mud, and straw, hold in warmth surprisingly well, though the thatched roof above tends to leak when the rains come hard. A few sunbeams pierce through small gaps, landing directly on the cold ashes of last night's hearth. Your family, all 8 of you, share this tight space, less than 10 paces wide. Privacy is a foreign luxury. No one here in the village expects it. No one misses it. You push aside the rough wool blanket and stand. The dirt underfoot is cool and familiar. From the other side of the room comes your father's loud snoring and the rustle of your eldest son turning in his sleep. He lies bundled in a sackcloth nest beside your brother. At the far corner, your mother sits hunched over, lips moving in silent prayer, as she does every morning. You slide back the crude wooden bolt and gently open the door. Outside, the air hits you like a splash of icy water, crisp, earthy, alive. Fog rolls low over the meadows. In the distance, you hear cattle lowing and chickens clucking from the coops. The smell of manure drifts faintly from the neighboring field. A typical morning in your corner of Europe. Back inside, you retrieve a hard, blackened loaf of bread from a cloth sack hanging on the wall. It's left over from yesterday, hard as a rock. You break off a chunk and dip it in a small mug of weak ale to soften it. Even the children drink ale in these times. It's safer than the well water, which often carries illness you can't name, but which everyone fears. Your wife stirs, nodding briefly to you as she rises. She grabs the wooden bucket and slips outside to fetch water from the village well. Your daughter starts rekindling the fire with dry twigs. The smell of smoldering ash and the faint sweetness of peat fill the air. The house slowly comes to life, not from urgency, but from long habit. Breakfast is meager. A bowl of thin oat porridge, the hard bread dipped in ale, and the hope that the rain won't come too soon. You put on your coarse wool tunic, threadbare at the elbows, and lace up your wooden clogs. Outside, the morning calls. You head toward the northern field, the one where your family grows barley. The harvest is mostly done, but the soil needs turning before winter. Your hands are still sore from the last week's labor, but you push forward. A peasant's life is one of constant repetition. The land does not wait, nor does it forgive idleness. On your way, you pass Thomas the blacksmith, pushing a cart full of broken tools. He nods, half smiling. "Need your plow mended?" he asks. You shake your head. You'd like to, but there's no coin to spare until next season, and you both know it. The church bell tolls in the distance, summoning the faithful to morning mass. You pause for a moment. You should go. But the field needs you more. You make a silent sign of the cross and continue walking. God will understand, you think. Still, a hint of guilt lingers in your chest. By midday, you return home, your tunic soaked in sweat and your hands covered in calluses and dirt. The sun is high, warm now, but not yet oppressive. Children run through the village square, chasing each other, singing the same rhymes their grandparents once sang. An old woman dries fish on her rooftop, shouting curses at a cat that's gotten too close. You stop by the tavern, not to drink, but to catch word. It's next to the chapel, with a sagging wooden sign and benches made from tree stumps. It's where the villagers go to hear news. Today, there's a stranger. A traveler. He wears a faded blue cloak, his face roughened by the sun. On his back, a bundle wrapped in silks and strange trinkets. In his hands, cinnamon sticks, copper mirrors, tiny flasks of perfume, treasures from faraway lands. He speaks in a hushed, serious tone. He tells a story, not of treasure or war, but of death. There's a sickness, he says, his voice low and hoarse. In the East, people fall ill without warning. They burn with fever. Their skin swells and blackens. 3 days, then dead. Whole towns gone. The villagers shift uneasily. Someone snorts. Another man laughs, brushing it off. Fairy tales for frightened children, he says. The East is half a world away. You don't laugh. You watch the traveler's eyes. There is no jest in them. That evening, your wife serves a thin stew of barley and root vegetables. Your youngest coughs. You pretend not to notice. The sound of your father's snores fills the small space, mixing with the crackle of the fire. Your mother murmurs a prayer for the traveler. May he lie, but may he be safe, she whispers. Your daughter hums a lullaby to the baby. Your brother carves a spoon from wood in the corner. It is peaceful, and yet something in you feels unsettled. Like the ground beneath your life has begun to shift, ever so slightly. You lie back down, staring at the rafters, listening to the quiet breathing of your family. The faint smell of smoke, sweat, and damp straw fills your nostrils. You do not know that this is the last truly ordinary day of your life. You do not know that the rhythms you followed since childhood, the bells, the prayers, the turning of the fields, will soon be drowned in the sounds of coughing, crying, and earth being shoveled over graves. You do not know yet, but the shadow has begun to fall. You don't sleep well that night. The image of the traveler's face, tight with weariness, his eyes carrying a weight that words didn't express, stays with you long after the hearth has gone cold. Something about the way he spoke had the ring of truth. Not a tale spun for coin or awe, but a warning, raw, unwanted, real. By morning, the fog has thickened, draping your village in gray. Your boots sink slightly into the damp earth as you step outside. Chickens cluck nervously in their coop. A dog barks down the lane, and crows circle overhead, black smudges against a pale sky. You tell yourself this is just a day like any other, but it doesn't feel like any other. You pass the tavern again, hoping the traveler is gone. He's not. He sits near the fire, cradling a cup of hot broth offered by the innkeeper's wife. Around him, villagers hover like moths, curious, skeptical, afraid. What does it look like? Someone asks. The sickness. The traveler doesn't answer immediately. He stares into his cup as though searching for courage. First, he says, it feels like a fever, but not like one you've known. This one sears your bones. Then come the swellings, under the arms, between the legs. Black as soot, painful to touch, pulsing like they're alive. Some bleed, others burst. Gasps ripple through the room. He continues, softer now. Sometimes the coughing starts next. Blood on the lips, a foul smell on the breath, and then stillness. Sometimes by the second day, always by the third. You listen from the doorway, half hidden, heart pounding. This plague, he whispers, it doesn't wait. It doesn't pity. It doesn't spare the holy or the humble. The crowd begins to murmur. Some scoff. Others cross themselves. One man spits on the floor and storms out, muttering about foreign lies. But you stay. You wait. And then in the pause, someone asks, where was it last? The traveler raises his eyes slowly. Marseilles, he says. And before that, Messina, Constantinople, Alexandria. It travels with the ships, with the trade. Your stomach tightens. Marseilles, that's not far. A few weeks by foot. A few days by cart, less by boat. Suddenly, the world feels much smaller. That afternoon, you visit the village chapel, not for Mass, but to speak with Father Elric. He's a solemn man, old but not feeble, with sharp blue eyes and a voice that carries wisdom and worry in equal measure. You find him sweeping the floor, alone. The altar candles burn low. You tell him what you heard. About the merchant, the disease, the black swellings. He doesn't laugh. Instead, he nods slowly, setting his broom aside. He gestures for you to sit. "I've heard of it too," he says quietly. "A letter from the monastery in Avignon arrived 2 weeks ago. They say death spreads along the coast like fire in dry hay. Even the brothers there are dying." You feel your pulse in your throat. "Is it punishment?" you ask. His mouth presses into a line. "Some say so, but I don't know. Children die. The pure die. The priests die." He sighs, deep and slow. "If it is punishment, then God's justice has grown cruel." You sit in silence for a long time. The chapel smells of melted wax, damp stone, and something older, the kind of stillness that wraps itself around bones. Outside, you hear shouting. You both rise and step into the courtyard. A small crowd has gathered near the square. A man, one of the field hands from the western farms, has collapsed in the dirt, convulsing. Foam at his lips. His eyes wide, unfocused. His wife screams, holding his head in her lap. The crowd stares. No one dares approach. Father Elric rushes forward, kneeling beside the man, whispering prayers as he tries to steady him. The man gasps, shudders, and then lies still. A whisper runs through the villagers like a gust of wind. "It's here." That night, your home feels different. The walls seem closer, the shadows deeper. You hold your children longer before they sleep. Your wife doesn't sing as she usually does. Instead, she crushes dried rosemary between her fingers and burns it in a clay dish. A charm passed down from her grandmother. For protection, she says. You don't believe in such things. But you don't stop her either. Outside, the village is quiet. No laughter, no songs. Just wind and the creak of shutters. You remember the traveler's words, "It travels with the ships." And you wonder, how many ports, how many carts, how many hands has it passed through? Days pass. Then weeks. The first death is buried in silence. Then another, a child. Then 2 more elders. No one says it aloud, not yet, but everyone knows. The baker's wife hangs a white cloth on their door. A signal. Morning. Inside, no one moves. The bread oven is cold. The village council, 3 elders, Father Elric and the Reeve, meet beneath the oak tree. You're not invited, but word spreads fast. They speak of closing the gates, of forbidding travel, of isolating anyone who falls ill. But it's too late. The disease doesn't ask permission. One evening, your brother comes home early from the fields. He looks pale. His hands tremble. He doesn't speak during supper. He barely eats. Later that night, you hear him coughing. The sound, wet, rasping, haunts your dreams. By dawn, he has a fever. By sunset, he has a black lump beneath his arm, the size of an egg. You sit beside him with a damp cloth. He mutters nonsense, eyes rolling. He sees things that aren't there. At one point, he grabs your wrist and whispers, "Don't let it inside." By the next morning, he is gone. You bury him yourself. The gravedigger has fled. The earth is cold. The shovel heavier than usual. Your hands blister. Your tears freeze before they fall. You say no prayer. You can't find the words. Back at home, your wife tries to be strong. She boils sage in water. She hangs herbs in the doorway. She rubs vinegar on the children's feet. You want to laugh. None of it makes sense. But you don't, because you're afraid she might be right. Because you're afraid nothing will help. Because you've started coughing too. The days after your brother's burial are a blur of silence, smoke, and superstition. The village begins to change, not all at once, but like a slow unraveling of something tightly woven. Where once the streets echoed with the clatter of carts and cheerful greetings, now there is only the sound of whispers and doors bolted from the inside. You stop attending church, not because you've lost faith, though perhaps you have, but because the pews are empty and the priest no longer appears at the altar. One morning, you walk past the chapel and see the door ajar. You push it open gently. Inside, Father Elric kneels in front of the crucifix, alone. His robes are stained, his face pale. He doesn't look at you. He mutters in Latin, then suddenly slams his fist against the wooden floor. You step back, and then he speaks, not to God, not to you, but into the stone silence that surrounds him. Why do you let this happen? His voice cracks. Why do the innocent die first? You close the door and walk away. You do not return. On the 5th day after your brother's death, your youngest child, Tomas, begins to cough. It starts as a soft tickle, the kind children get when they play in the dust. But by evening, his forehead burns to the touch. He cries out in his sleep, clutching his belly. Your wife holds him through the night, rocking slowly, humming a lullaby you've heard since you were a child. By dawn, black blotches begin to bloom across his chest. You and your wife do not speak. You only look at each other, wide-eyed, hollow, afraid. There is no gravedigger left in the village. No one willing to touch the dead. No priest to give the last rites. When Tomas stops breathing, your wife lets out a sound you have never heard before, low, guttural, primal. She does not cry. She does not scream. She simply wraps him in linen and places his small body in a wooden box meant for storing grain. You carry it on your back to the burial field. The ground is already full of shallow graves, some barely covered. You find a spot beneath the ash tree and dig. Your hands blister. Your knees bleed. The wind howls. When the task is done, you return home and fall into the dirt by the fire, unable to speak, unable to think. That night you do not eat. You do not pray. You simply lie still, waiting. The days blur. More white cloths appear on doors. The tavern is shut. The blacksmith's forge cold. The market stalls abandoned. A group of villagers, terrified and desperate, gather in the square, lashing themselves with whips in public penance. They march in circles, chanting prayers, blood dripping from their backs. They believe this will appease God's wrath. You watch them from the shadows, your hands trembling, your mind a storm. You wonder if God even watches anymore. The next evening, the priest's bell tolls 3 times. You and your wife step outside and see smoke rising from the chapel. The roof is ablaze. A child, one of the altar boys, had lit a candle in panic, hoping it would keep the evil away. The fire spread quickly, consuming the dry rafters, leaping from one wooden beam to the next. By the time villagers gathered with buckets, it was too late. The chapel collapses in a plume of smoke and ash. The crucifix, blackened and broken, is found among the rubble the next morning. The sign, some say. Judgment, say others. You say nothing. You and your wife return to your cottage and seal the door with heavy cloth, stuffing the cracks with straw soaked in vinegar. Inside, you burn rosemary, lavender, and garlic. Not because you believe it will work, but because doing nothing feels worse. One morning, there's a knock at your door. You hesitate. No one knocks anymore. When you open it, you find a girl standing barefoot in the frost. She can't be more than 10. Her hands are red and cracked. Her nose runs. Her dress is too thin for the cold. "My father is dead," she says flatly. Her voice has no tremble. "My mother too." You invite her inside. Your wife gives her a blanket. You offer her the last of your oat porridge. She eats in silence. You ask her name. Elsbeth. She doesn't ask to stay. She doesn't have to. Winter comes early. The roads are empty. The river slows beneath a sheet of thin ice. You no longer count the dead. Instead, you count the living. 17 families remain, maybe less. The wreath is gone. Father Elric has not been seen in weeks. A man named Harold, once a drunk and a joke among the villagers, now leads prayers in the square. He wears a rope around his waist and claims visions of Saint Michael. People follow him, not because they believe, but because they need someone to follow. Your wife keeps to her garden. Elsbeth collects kindling. You sharpen tools that may never be used. Then one day your wife begins to cough. You do not panic, not at first. You tell yourself it's the cold. You tell yourself it's nothing. But when you see her sitting by the fire, one hand pressed beneath her arm, her face flushed, you know. She looks at you with wide, steady eyes. "I'm not afraid," she says softly, "but you are. You are terrified." She lasts 4 days. You bury her beneath the elm tree next to Tomas. You place rosemary on the grave, and lavender, and a carved wooden spoon, the one she used to feed your children. Then you return to the cottage. Elsbeth is silent. She hugs you without words. And that night, you fall to your knees for the first time in months, not to pray, but to scream. You scream until your voice cracks, until the silence of the heavens suffocates you, until your body gives out. And in the darkness, with nothing left, you ask the question everyone is too afraid to say aloud. If God is not here, then who is? You do not die. You expect to, every hour, you expect your breath to catch, your skin to bloom with bruises, your lungs to fill with blood. But you do not. The sickness passes you by like a phantom. Elsbeth too, she grows thin and quiet, but no black swellings ever rise beneath her arms, no fever breaks her resolve. The two of you survive that winter not through strength or faith or reason. You survive through something you cannot see, something inside you, hidden in the marrow of your bones, locked in your blood. It will be centuries before anyone understands why. In the spring of 1348, the frost recedes. Snow melts into streams. Birds return to abandoned trees. Fields once full of rot and silence slowly turn green again. You step outside one morning and find yourself startled by the color of the world. It seems wrong somehow, too alive, too bright, too unbothered by everything it has witnessed. The sun rises like it always has, as though it has no memory of fire, ash, or plague. You feel guilt. You feel shame. And yet, you feel hunger, a fierce, stubborn hunger for life. The village is unrecognizable. Out of nearly 200 souls, less than 30 remain. Entire families gone. Cottages sealed with soot and cloth sit empty. The tavern's roof has caved in. The fields are wild. But within the ruins, movement begins again. A man named Oswin, once a tailor, now leads efforts to rebuild. He's not particularly wise, nor devout, nor strong. But he has survived, and now, survival is its own kind of authority. He calls a meeting beneath the charred remains of the chapel. There is no altar now, only stones. No pews, only logs dragged from the forest. But the people come. You come. And for the first time in months, voices rise not in mourning, but in planning. Oswin speaks of soil, tools, walls that need mending. He points out that with the reeve dead and no lord having visited the manor since midsummer, the village is untethered. We are no one's serfs now, he says, eyes shining. No one has come to claim us. No one may. There are murmurs, some skeptical, some afraid, but no one protests. The old world is dead. And from the ashes, something new tries to breathe. You are given the task of scribe. Not because of honor, but necessity. You can read, barely, and write with a hand steadier than most. Father Elric once taught you years ago, when he thought you might serve the church. That future never came. But now, those skills return. With a salvaged quill and a ledger found beneath rubble, you begin to record the names of the dead. Then the living. Then the births. One evening, while copying a list of tools lost during the winter, you are interrupted by Elsbeth. She brings you a sprig of mint from the garden and a rough sketch she's made on a piece of bark. It's a drawing of you, hunched over parchment, candlelight flickering across your face. She's added too much hair to your head, and your nose is too straight. But you smile anyway. You hang it on the wall. One afternoon, a rider arrives. Not from the manor, but from another village far to the north. He wears a red scarf around his mouth and refuses food or drink. He carries messages sealed in wax, notes about other survivors, news from cities like York, rumors of waves of sickness still moving across the continent. He also brings something else, a theory. Not from a priest, but a physician. A scholar from Montpellier has begun to suspect that some people cannot catch the plague. They've touched the dead, the writer says, buried dozens, slept beside the sick, and lived. You and Elsbeth glance at each other. His voice lowers. They think it may be in the blood, a protection, something passed from parent to child. You say nothing, but inside, something stirs. Could it be true? Could it be that what spared you and her was not fate nor mercy, but biology? A hidden trait? A mutation? Centuries from now, scientists will discover it. A rare genetic mutation, Delta 3-2, which prevents certain viruses from binding to white blood cells. In those who carry 2 copies of the gene, immunity to both the Black Death and HIV is near total. This mutation, nearly non-existent in most of the world, exists in higher frequency among descendants of plague survivors in Northern Europe. And unknowingly, you are one of them. Your blood carries the scars of history, and the tools to defy it. But in 1348, you do not know this. You only know that you are alive, that you buried your son with your own hands, but still wake each morning, that your wife is gone, and yet Elsbeth's small voice still calls for breakfast, that your lungs still draw air, that your hands still work the soil. You write by candlelight at night, mapping the graves, listing the births, measuring the food stores. You plant onions. You teach Elsbeth how to mix vinegar and crushed mint to wash linens. You watch the sky for signs, not divine, but weather. Rain means mold. Too much sun, the crops die. No one looks to heaven anymore. You look to the soil. And yet, there are moments, in the hush between dusk and night, when you feel something greater than grief. A breeze that smells of rosemary. A silence that feels not empty, but full. The way the stars still move above, indifferent and eternal. You wonder if survival, quiet, stubborn, unspectacular survival, is a kind of grace after all. The road to the manor is overgrown. Where once wagons rumbled daily, now wild grasses curl between the stones. A wooden sign bearing the crest of your absent lord sways crookedly from a rusted nail. You pass it with only a glance. He has not returned. Not since the second wave. No letters. No steward. No claim. He was last seen fleeing south with a caravan of clergy, nobles, and their retinues. Rumors say he succumbed to the plague near the coast. Others say he hides in a monastery, waiting for the world to right itself. But the world will not right itself. It is being rewritten. And you, a man who once bent the knee for bread, are among those holding the pen. At the village gathering, Oswin speaks louder now. We are no longer bound, he proclaims, standing atop a broken cart like a prophet. No serf, no tenant, no tithe. No one argues. Not because all agree, but because no one left has the strength to. The hierarchy has crumbled. And in its place, possibility. The blacksmith, once a man chained to one forge, one price, one rule, now sets his own hours and trades tools for meat or labor. A widow with 3 sons begins milling flour in the old granary and keeps every sack for her own household. You no longer give grain to the reeve, because there is no reeve. Elsbeth paints the sign for the new marketplace. It simply reads, "The Commons." Yet freedom is not easy. With no lord to command labor, no steward to assign tasks, disputes begin to emerge. Who owns the land that once belonged to the squire? Who can live in the stone house near the well, now that its family has vanished? You are asked to mediate, because you can read, because you keep the records, because, somehow, without seeking it, people now come to you with questions they used to bring to priests and noblemen. You settle disputes. You draft agreements. You write down the new laws. Simple ones, but yours. In the 4th month of spring, a group of strangers arrives. Refugees from another village, smaller, poorer, and harder hit than yours. They are thin, sunken-eyed, but not sick. They offer trade. Skills. Source. One woman is a midwife. Another, a mason's daughter who knows how to repair walls. Some villagers fear them. They'll bring the plague, someone whispers. But Oswin reminds them, we were once the strangers. You offer them space in the east fields. They build with haste, but not fear. And the village grows. One night, as you copy names into your ledger by firelight, Elsbeth asks a question you didn't expect. Were we always poor? You look at her. She's older now. Wiser than a child should be. Her voice is steady. You set your pen down. Yes, you say, but we didn't know it. She nods, then quietly returns to drawing. A new marketplace, a house with flowering vines, a well in the center. Hope on parchment. In midsummer, a traveler arrives from the south, well-dressed, clean-shaven, and soft-handed. A former steward. He brings a scroll sealed in red wax. It declares that the Lord's heir now claims ownership of the manor, the lands, and all serfs therein. Labor is to resume. Rents are due. Tithes must be paid. He speaks as if the past year had never happened. The villagers do not react with violence. But they do not bow either. Oswin steps forward and simply says, "What lord?" The steward stammers. He points to the scroll. "You are bound," he insists. You walk up beside Oswin. "No," you reply. "We are living. The dead may keep their contracts." The steward leaves the next morning. He does not return. Later, you hear word of other villages like yours. Some form councils. Others elect leaders. Some trade across rivers. Some defend themselves with sharpened sticks and stone walls. Some are destroyed, but many survive. And in that survival, power begins to shift. The harvest that year is small, not for lack of land, but lack of hands. Even so, each family eats. And for the first time in your life, no tithe is hauled away in a cart toward a manor you'll never see. No grain disappears into a priest's cellar. No ox is taken for holy dues. Everything remains where it is grown, in your soil, in your village, among the living. One evening, you sit beneath the stars. Elsbeth lies beside you, pointing upward. "That one," she says, "is the hunter." You nod. And for the first time in over a year, you let yourself believe that tomorrow will come, not by miracle, but by work. That the world has not ended. It has begun again. And this time, you are not just a witness. You are part of the architecture. The story reaches your village in late summer, brought by a bearded trader in a patched cloak. He speaks in a low voice, not because he fears being overheard, but because the weight of the tale itself demands reverence. It is the story of Im, a village far to the west, nestled in the green folds of the Derbyshire hills. The two was ordinary once. Children playing in fields, church bells marking the hours, men harvesting barley under the sun, until the cloth arrived, a bolt of fabric shipped from London, still damp from the docks, infested, though no one knew it then, fleas hidden deep within its folds. By the time the tailor opened the package, it was already too late. The sickness spread fast, faster than fear. People dropped where they stood. Families died within days of each other, those who could have fled, but many stayed. Among them, a man named William Mompesson, the rector, and another, Thomas Stanley, a former minister turned dissenter. Together, two men with opposing beliefs called the village together under the shadow of death, and offered a choice, not of escape, but of sacrifice. They asked the unthinkable, let no one leave, let no one enter. They proposed a voluntary quarantine, to draw a line around the village, to seal it, to die, perhaps, so others might live. You sit in silence as the trader speaks. The villagers around you shift uncomfortably. Elsbeth clutches your sleeve. They agreed, someone asks, incredulous. The trader nods. Most did. Some ran, but most stayed. Why? The trader shrugs. Because sometimes doing right means choosing to be forgotten. They chose death, and in doing so, they became legend. Your nights are haunted by this tale. You imagine what it was like, the quiet as the last cart left the village, the slow realization that there would be no help, the empty roads, the sealed doors, the counting of dead by candlelight. And yet, something inside you stirs. A different kind of fear. Not of death, but of nobility, of purpose in suffering. Weeks pass. Then, as autumn begins, your village faces its own test. A neighboring settlement, Westvale, sends word. The sickness has returned. Only a few cases, they say. Nothing like before, but enough to reopen old wounds. You gather with Oswin and the others in the market square. Some want to close the village entirely. Others insist it's panic. You listen, then speak. We survived once, not because we shut the world out, but because we cared for the sick, buried our dead, shared our bread. We survived together, not apart. Oswin nods. The others murmur in agreement. So instead of sealing your gates, you offer aid. You send vinegar, dried herbs, spare cloth. You write letters of comfort to families you've never met. You send Elsbeth's drawings, flowers, birds, stars, because sometimes the heart heals before the body. But not all stories are so bright. You hear that Westvale lost 15 more by winter, that their blacksmith walked into the forest and never returned, that their priest refused to give final rites and was found alone, delirious, muttering about angels. Still, Im's story lingers. You write it down one night in your ledger, not as history, but as inheritance. A record of courage. A reminder that even in plague, there is choice. Not to live. Not always. But to protect. To carry light into the dark. Then comes the part that chills you most. A man named Marshall Howe, a gravedigger from another afflicted village. He took coin to bury the dead. And they say he robbed the corpses too. He entered every house, touched every infected body, handled clothing, bedding, jewelry, flesh. And yet, he never fell ill. Not once. Some cursed his name. Others called him chosen. You recognize something else, evidence. A puzzle piece. Another clue in the mystery of survival. You write his name in the margins. Circle it. Then draw a line back to your own. When snow falls again, it brings silence, but not fear. You've seen fear. You've lived through the worst of it. This snow, though, feels different. It muffles the land in peace. It covers the graves with softness. It reminds you that seasons still turn, that the world, bruised and bleeding, is still alive. And as you sit by the fire, Elsbeth asleep beside you, you think of those villagers in Eam, who knew they would die, and still chose the harder road. You wonder if any of them survived, if their descendants now walk the same earth as you. Perhaps you'll never know, but you carry their legacy as surely as you carry the blood that refused to give in. The plague marked you, but it did not break you. Spring does not arrive all at once. It creeps, like a cautious guest approaching a house once filled with grief. The snow melts slowly, feeding the dry veins of the land. You wake one morning to the sound of birdsong, tentative, uncertain, like a voice relearning melody after a season of silence. At first, you think you've imagined it, but it's real. Life is returning. In the fields, green pushes through the earth like forgiveness. Trees bud. Rain comes in short, warm bursts. You kneel with your hands in the dirt, planting seeds with Elsbeth at your side. Her fingers move deftly now. She knows which roots need space, which sprigs bend toward sun. Neither of you speak. The act of planting is enough. The act of trusting tomorrow will come. The village, though still wounded, stirs. A new roof goes up over the blacksmith's forge. A baby is born to the baker's widow, a boy, red-faced and squalling. Children chase one another around the well again. Laughter returns, soft at first, then louder, as if daring death to listen. But not all wounds heal with spring. There are fewer of you now, enough to see the gaps. At the marketplace, stalls sit empty where familiar faces once stood. Every bench in the square bears memories. Every path through the woods reminds you of someone who once walked it. And some homes remain sealed, untouched since last autumn. No one dares open them. They are tombs now, quiet and sacred. At night you dream, not of plague, not anymore, but of those lost. Your wife holding Tomas. Your brother laughing over burnt stew. They visit you in silence, not to haunt, but to remind that you are still here, that you carry their names, that spring belongs to the living, but is built on the ashes of the dead. One afternoon, you pass by the old chapel ruins and find someone there. A young woman, stranger to you. She kneels where the altar once stood, planting tiny white flowers in a shallow trench. You ask her name, and she says, "I came from the north. My whole family gone." She smiles, not in joy, but in quiet defiance. "I heard about this place, about how you lived. I thought, maybe it would be safe." You help her dig. The next morning, the council gathers. There is no real council, just Oswin, you, and a handful of those who still believe in organizing chaos. And speaks. So do others. A carpenter offers to teach. A boy volunteers to care for the goats. Elsbeth proposes a school, a room where children can read and draw and remember. You agree. You'll teach them to write their names, to tell their stories, to become more than shadows of the dead. But not everyone is ready. One man, Gregory, a farmer who lost 5 children, refuses to speak at all. He comes to meetings but says nothing. He works the field but never joins meals. You try once, bringing him bread and broth. He takes it without thanks. You understand. Grief has no schedule, no map, only wait. Weeks pass. The village swells again, not with numbers, but with rhythm. You can feel it, the pulse of routine, the heartbeat of days not dictated by terror. Bake, plant, sing. Children make up new songs. Some of them absurd and joyful, others strange echoes of the past. Ring round the garden, Petals in bloom, ashes in the evening, don't go too soon. It chills you, but you say nothing. They sing to survive. As did you. In late spring, you rebuild the chapel. Not as it was. No stone altar. No marble cross. Just 4 beams and a roof to keep out rain. Inside, a long table. On it, names. Not of saints or kings, but of those who lived here, and those who died. Elsbeth paints them in red ink. And above, she writes, "We were not spared, but we were not destroyed." One evening, as twilight softens the sky, you sit by the fire, ledger in hand. You flip back through the pages. The first lists were of the dead, the next of those who remained. Now, the newest pages hold different entries. Births, trades, source. A boy named Peter who laughs like your brother once did. A girl who wants to build carts. A woman named and who sings when she thinks no one listens. The future, written in your own hand. Line by line. Ashes to roots. Roots to blossom. The winds shift. Not the ones in your valley. Those remain gentle, full of pollen and wood smoke, but the winds of the world beyond. Travelers passing through speak of unrest. Of murmurs becoming shouts. Of the old ways crumbling, not just in your village, but everywhere. The kings and lords who once ruled without question now find their halls hollow. Their farms untended. Their orders met with silence. For the first time in memory, the laborer holds the blade by its hilt, not the nobility. And they don't know what to do about it. It begins with a messenger. He arrives in dusty boots, bearing a scroll. His cloak bears the crest of a distant baron whose name you've not heard in years. The scroll is a decree. Wages are to be fixed again. No laborer may demand more than the old rate. Any man who refuses to work for less shall be punished. A laugh breaks from someone in the crowd. Not a joyful laugh, a bitter one. You read the decree aloud anyway, because someone must. When you finish, silence follows. Then Oswin stands. If he wants to pay less, he says, he can come plow the fields himself. Laughter erupts, this time real. No one signs the decree. The messenger leaves without his scroll. Days later, a rider from a nearby village appears, eyes wild. There's been a rebellion, he says. In the south, dozens of villages. They've burned tax offices, marched to the manor gates, demanded rights. You ask what happened next. They sent soldiers, he says. Some were killed. But the lords are afraid now. They're losing control. You don't know whether to cheer or tremble. That night, you sit by candlelight and copy the decree into your ledger. Beneath it you write, "They tried to bind us again with ink, but the ink ran dry." Elsbeth asks if there will be war. You hesitate. "There already was," you reply. She tilts her head. You point to her chest. "In here. In your village, no banners are raised, no swords forged, but rebellion takes other forms. You teach children to read. You carve names into stone markers for the dead, not of lords, but of weavers, midwives, shepherds. You write new contracts between workers and families. Simple, fair, signed with ink and fingerprint. You write laws that forbid forced labor, tithes to ghostly landlords, and punishments without cause. One man asks what gives you the right. You look around at the village, rebuilt, breathing. What gives us the right, you say, is that we're still alive. Then comes a letter, carried by a friar. It's addressed to the people of the uplands. A noble in the lowlands offers terms. He will forgive unpaid rents. He will not enforce labor bonds. But, he writes, the people must agree to provide grain come harvest, as a sign of continued loyalty. You read it aloud. There's no anger in your voice, just weariness. Another test. Another collar, painted gold. Oswin votes no. So do the others. But you pause. Because grain is easier to part with than suns. Because winter always returns. Because peace, even uneasy peace, is not weakness. You propose a counteroffer. But only what is surplus. And only if their soldiers never step foot here. It's sent. No reply ever comes. By midsummer, more villages come to you. A woman from the east wants to trade seeds. A man from the west brings bricks and stories of a commune near the sea, where no one owns land, only labor. You listen. You learn. You wonder what kind of world is blooming from the grave of the old one. Then one night you gather everyone. Not for mourning. Not for decree. But for something new. Under stars you light a fire. Children recite stories they've written. Elsbeth sings. You read from the ledger, the names of those who survived, not to bind them, but to honor them. You declare the date not as a feast day, nor a holy day, but as remembrance. A day to recall not just who was lost, but who rose. Later, as the embers fade, you walk within, the quiet builder who came north and stayed. She speaks of her village, gone now. Of her father, who never got to see the house she finished. She asks you if you think all of this new way, this freedom, will last. You don't answer right away. Then you say, I don't know. But if it doesn't, we'll build again. She nods. She takes your hand. Not out of romance, but solidarity. Two peasants. Two survivors. Two rebels against history. Summer bleeds into autumn. The fields, once bright and humming, take on the amber hush of harvest. Leaves curl and drift in golden spirals. Smoke rises daily, not from funeral pyres, but from ovens, chimneys, and the forges of the newly returned smiths. But fire holds memory. And in this village that has already burned once, fire is never just fire. It is warning. It is ritual. It is remembrance. Elsbeth begins collecting herbs again. Not just for cooking, though the stews you now share are richer than they've ever been, but for healing. She's been learning from the older women who remained. From their satchels and whispered recipes. Mugwort for fevers. Sage for strength. Lavender for peace. And a mixture of rosemary, vinegar, and crushed garlic for wounds that won't close. You build her a small shed near the old well, her apothecary. There is no sign above the door. But people come, because pain still lingers. Because some things cannot be named, only soothed. A boy comes with swollen joints. A woman with dreams she can't shake. A man with shaking hands and no memory of why. Elsbeth listens. And you watch her become not just a healer, but a keeper of memory. Because every patient carries a scar they don't speak of. And every scar tells a story. In early October, a strange item arrives by cart. A sealed wooden chest. It comes from a distant abbey, one still standing, sent by a friar who heard of your village through a mason traveling the north. You open it carefully, surrounded by others. Inside, books. Dozens of them. Medical treatises. Herbals written in Latin and Greek. Diagrams of the body. Maps of veins, bones, organs. Some are too advanced to read. Others are full of superstition. Lunar charts, humors, leeches, bleeding charts. But still, knowledge. The room falls silent as you hold one open, the parchment yellow and frayed. No one says it aloud, but all feel it. You are no longer just surviving. You are learning. You are changing. That night, you stay up copying pages into your own hand, drawing rough diagrams, translating bits into the common tongue, writing side notes where the texts contradict what you've seen with your own eyes. This plant does not heal fever, but reduces swelling in the throat. Boiled nettle water calmed Elsbeth's cough after 4 nights. This, you realize, is how truth survives plague. Not by priests, Not by kings, but by hands that hold tools and try, fail, and try again. But not all memory is welcome. There are those who still blame, still whisper, "That woman survived because she made a deal with devils. That family was spared because they're cursed." You overhear a man accuse and of burning herbs that call spirits. You intervene, gently, but firmly. "We survived," you say. "We do not owe anyone an explanation for why." But you also know, stories shape reality. If you do not shape them, someone else will. So you begin writing something new. Not a ledger, not a treaty, but a book. One of your own. A record not of kings or saints, but of what actually happened to your people, your land, your time. You call it The Book of Fire. Elsbeth draws the cover. A tree with roots wrapped around a flame, burning, but unbroken. One day, she brings you a dried bundle wrapped in linen. Inside, a scrap of plague doctor's robe. Stiff, black, cut from the edge of a garment found sealed in one of the old houses. "It should be remembered," she says simply. You press it into the book's final page. News from afar still reaches you. In the south, cities build quarantine walls now, not just for plague, but for fear. In Venice, they name an island for isolation, Lazaretto. In England, doctors begin carrying canes to examine the sick without touching them. In France, ships must wait 40 giorni, 40 days, before docking. You write these things down, because knowledge is not permanent, because memory is a fragile torch easily lost. You remember the nursery rhyme the children sang in spring. "Ring around the garden." They no longer sing it, not because they forgot, but because they remember too well. Instead, they now sing songs of harvest, of goats, of thunder and bread and wolves in the woods. New songs. You smile when you hear them, because even memory must evolve. One stormy night, you dream of fire, not flames of death, but of torches, held by villagers walking the fields, lighting lanterns, illuminating the paths that had once led only to graves. And you realize, the fire that once consumed you is now the fire that guides you. Dawn breaks cold and golden across the rooftops. It is not a special morning, no feast, no birth, no arrival. And yet, something in the air feels different, lighter, as though the land itself has taken a long breath after holding it for years. You rise as you always do, feed the goats, rake the ashes from the hearth, sweep the chapel's simple floor. These acts have become sacred now, not for their ritual, but for their continuity, for surviving, for continuing, for being. The village is no longer a place mourning the past. It is a place building the future, stone by stone, child by child, word by word. Elsbeth turns 15 this spring. She is not a girl anymore. She walks with the confidence of someone who has stared death in the eye and seen it blink. Her hands are stained with berry dye from the cloths she makes. She teaches the younger ones how to distill mint oil and dry rose petals between books. You once feared she would carry her trauma in silence forever. But now, you see, she is not only surviving the past. She is shaping what comes after. A man from the southern coast arrives with a wagon of books and tools. He offers iron nails in exchange for rye grain. When he sees your book of fire, he stares in quiet awe. "I thought only monks did that," he says. You smile. "Monks weren't here when we buried our dead." He nods slowly, then offers you a gift, a small glass vial with a cork, and inside, a paper scroll bearing a diagram of something unknown. It is a drawing of a human cell, imagined, not seen. A guess. But even guesses, written down, become maps. You add it to the book. Later, you write a letter addressed not to anyone alive now, but to those who may live long after you're gone. To whoever finds this, We were not great. We had no armor. We sang no songs of war. We simply endured. And in enduring, we changed. The world around us cracked and burned, but we held the line. You walk because we stood. You tuck it in the last page, beside the scrap of plague doctor's robe, and bind the book closed with string. In midsummer, and gives birth to a girl. She names her Hope. The name is met with silence at first, too large, too raw. But as the weeks pass, it begins to feel right. A child named for what no one dared speak of during the worst days. You carve the name into the village ledger. Not in black ink, but in red. Children no longer ask what the plague was. They ask what came next. You tell them stories of how people stayed when they could have run, of white cloths on doors and songs sung in low voices, of the village that chose death to save strangers, of the blood that lived on when everything else fell silent. You teach them the word resilience. They repeat it, mouths unsure, but their eyes understand. Then, one autumn morning, a letter arrives. Not from a noble, not from a church, from a scholar. She writes from the university in Paris, a woman who has heard of your records, your survival, your mutations, your notes on herbal treatments and patterns of inheritance. She asks for a copy of your book. She writes of the future, of medicine, of anatomy, of microscopes being invented in Italy. She believes, somehow, some way, that you may have preserved a piece of truth no one else did. You weep when you read her name, Julian Mompesson, a descendant of Eam, the village that chose death, the village that lived in you. The circle, it seems, has closed. In your final pages, you write, the blood of the living remembers. It carries the fire of all who came before. We did not die to make way. We endured to light the path. And now, years later, you, the peasant who once could not read, who once buried a son with shaking hands, are known not as survivor nor scribe, but as witness to suffering, to resilience, to rebirth. You are not immortal, but your story is. And when your body returns to the soil, it will carry with it not only sorrow, but seed. Because fire may consume, but it also forges. And blood, when it remembers, builds worlds.